Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd. Chris Boyd is a certified financial planner practitioner and senior vice president and financial advisor at Wealth Enhancement Group, one of the nation's largest registered investment advisors. We call it Something More because we'd like to talk not only about those important dollar and cents issues, but also the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Here he is, your fulfillment facilitator, your partner in prosperity, advising clients on Cape Cod and across the country. Here's your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
Welcome to another episode of Something More with Chris Boyd. I'm Jeff Perry. I'm co-hosting this episode today with my teammate, Russ Ball. Russ, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff. Happy to be here.
Another episode of Something More with Chris Boyd, and we usually talk about, finance and investing, and we usually tend to lean towards people in retirement. That's the bulk of our business, right? Most of our clients, not all, certainly, we have plenty of families, but most people who come to us are in the mode of, I need a plan to be able to retire early, retire at all, and all the things that come with that. Or they are, a young couple maybe saying, we got to get our act together. How should we invest money? That's, common things that people start to invest or go to a financial advisor, and that's all good. I think we're going to lean towards the younger demographic, children, because so much of what happens to us as young adults and older adults is based upon how we're raised, the values, the morals that we're raised with, how we perceive our family and the lessons that we get from them. A lot of this is imprinted on us, not only by what people who raised us tell us, but really more so, more is caught than taught, right? How our families live. We see clients who might be in their 60s or 70s and have a wonderful financial plan. They have lots more assets than they need. They should be thinking about legacy planning or living a great retirement, but they still have this scarcity, like, I don't think I have enough, or I'm worried about running out of money. And, we know from the numbers that we crunch for them that you're fine. But because of that, they were raised in a certain time or in a certain family or had some certain events in their life that they can't process that they are fine. Do you see that with the people that you've been meeting with?
Absolutely, yeah. Just as you were saying that, I was thinking about a specific case of a client where, she grew up in a relatively, impoverished family, and that was sort of her upbringing. And so she had to really keep everything close to the chest and not really be spending. And now she's in retirement. I think, enjoy retirement, but she asks, like, is this something I can do? Is, like, can I support my family? Can I, like, help my grandkids out? And it's like with this a bit of trepidation. It's not like, oh yeah, like, let me just
Instead of joy, right? It should be
right.
joyful.
It
Right.
should be. And then when we get to show that to her that it'll work out, I think it's great. What a gift and a
Mhm.
blessing for people to be able to feel that freedom. And like you said in the past, like, having that permission to be able to do the things you need. And even if you grew up with a difficult background around finances and money, it's yeah.
I know that even though I didn't view them as lessons at the time, I have many lessons from growing up. I grew up in my grandparents' home with my mother and her parents, my grandparents, and my grandfather, who was my male role model. He's over this shoulder here. If people are watching on YouTube. World War One veteran, grew up. Uh, he lived during the Depression, so he lived difficultly during the Depression. He was World War One veteran, and he had a lot of experiences, and it made him a great man, made him a great dad for me. But one thing that he was constantly talking about with me when I was growing up and getting older, and was don't get into debt, don't get into debt. And I just thought this was like good advice, so I followed it, and it stick with me. We joke around the office sometime. Chris Boyd gives me hard times about things that I believe. Like, I'm much more restrictive than most people on debt, right?
Mhm.
And this comes from my grandfather, and it's served me well. Other people, they like leverage and they do great with it. I'm just
Yeah,
talking about me and how it impacted me. But as I got older, I'm like, this wasn't just advice. Was him, his life, his fears, his scarcity, and he had a very successful auto repair business later in life. He owned several homes. He was fine, but till his last breath,
yeah,
he wouldn't borrow a dime from anyone, and he was very like, no debt, Jeff, no debt. And it's because he didn't want someone he cared about to go through the same things that he did
of course. Yeah,
back in the 1930s. And we're talking, these conversations are happening in the 1970s and 1980s, right?
yeah.
So, and other people who maybe had different circumstances have different impacts. So, for this episode, I want to talk about raising a financially literate child, and certainly about good behavior to model as parents. Um, I guess we can start wherever you want. But how do you have any, before we do you have any like reflections on lessons that were imparted to you as a youngster?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny. I was thinking about this in preparing for this podcast, and it's sort of a mixed bag with my childhood. I think money wasn't something that was talked about all that frequently, finances and all that. Um, but I do remember, getting my middle school, getting my allowance,
Hmm.
and I think it was like $5. I don't know if it was like every other week or whatever it was, but it was just it was a small amount, and
Were you on
for
auto pay or did you have to earn it?
for the five I was on auto, and then for for um for other things I remember like my dad would have us like stack firewood
Hmm.
and you know uh
You could work overtime and make extra
yeah,
money.
you could do overtime and get. I remember we'd in out here in Cape Cod on the beach. He would have us pull up like the roots of the little like grasses that
Hmm.
grow on the beach, and he'd say like you get 5 cents for each for each pile you get or whatever it was. And I remember that was like very fun, and it's exciting. You feel like you're every little thing you're doing, you're earning something. So there was definitely a little bit of that. But in general, we didn't money wasn't a very talked about thing, and that's something I've sort of learned over time. And I think whenever I have kids, I think I am excited to be able to use what I've learned and impart that upon them. But
Yeah, I think that money isn't talked about. You know, mantra was how most of us grew up, and
yeah,
if it was talked about, it was often talked about. And this is not my example, so I feel fortunate, but I've seen this with other clients and some family members as well. Um, if money was ever talked about, it was an argument about money.
right,
And if you think about what an argument between parents does, even if the child isn't involved, the child just, I just said it a minute ago, more is taught than caught. They can imprint this belief that money is arguments. Talking about money is an argument. Therefore, I'm not going to talk about money either. And that can stick with them for the rest of their life, as we referenced in the beginning
yeah,
of the show. So, parents modeling good behavior and methods of teaching a child to be literate, to understand finances, I think is is a good topic for us today. And you mentioned the allowance in middle school, so let's start there. It's like, how old should a child be before that you start to introduce them to money? And I think it's really young. I think
yeah,
it doesn't have to be an allowance, but an allowance is a great place to start, where they understand that they receive money. I think if there's a work component to it, it's it's more related. Like there's also an ethic there. Like, you get this. I don't know, $5 would do it today. I hear what
yeah,
I was at a concert, like a small community concert with some friends, and they were talking about that their daughter was giving our friend's daughter was giving their grandchild an allowance, and it was like, I think it was $50. It wasn't a week, maybe that was a month, but I'm
right.
like, then you hear what babysitters make. Like, this is a different world. But
It
back
is.
off the tangent, back to allowance. An allowance that's based on something, even if it's something the child was doing anyway, just so there's some connection between having money and doing something, whether it's you know, $10 a week because you make your bed every morning, and you pick up your room,
Yeah.
and you bring your laundry to the laundry room, or whatever the parent decides. Just some connection, and if they don't perform, then they don't get that allowance. So if you don't go to work, as simple as that is, that's a important lesson to instill on young people.
It's a good point. Yeah. I think you know, the big thing with the allowance for me that was helpful, and the reason I would encourage it now is like, if you give the kid a few dollars, then it's up to them. They're not going to get money again for another couple weeks or whatever it is. Like that's their budget, let's say. So then it's up to them how they're going to spend it. Do they spend it day one on whatever $5 will get you, but or
Right.
do they spread it out over
And
time?
some will. But the lesson of then not having the money to go get that ice cream that they wanted, or something that the parent wasn't going to buy anyway, is
Exactly.
a lesson that maybe you have to defer some of your spending.
Yeah, and that's how you start like grasping how money actually works as a kid. So
Another lesson that I was taught, and it's kind of the focus of most. I was reviewing some lessons that are suggested for young people prior to the podcast, and this was in a couple of them. And I'm sure my mother and grandparents didn't read these articles, 50 years ago, but teach your children, grandchildren, what money is for, and it's not just for spending. Because I think that can be, a inadvertent lesson. Like, here's your money. What are you going to buy? Right.
right, that's true. Yeah,
Right. So money is to spend, money's to enjoy, but money is also to save. So teaching the concept of delayed gratification, which most of us don't have anymore, right?
right.
Between online shopping and, pay now,
Yeah,
not pay now, buy now, pay later, and all these ways to defer the responsibility for something you're having right now. Teaching your child that money's for some shopping, for some buying, but also for saving for something that is larger than you can have in 1 week. Delayed gratification, deferred spending, and it's also a tool to do good with it, to give some money away. So to spend it, to save it, and to give it, and to encourage. This is a strategy I used with our granddaughter. Well, she's older now, but when she was younger and I would give her money, I would say, so you got three things you have to do with this money. You can spend some of it, you can save some of it later, and you can give some of it, and you get to decide how much. But I'd like you to do all three.
yeah, that's a good strategy.
And it teaches on the charity side, even if they take a small portion of it, they see how they feel when they help somebody else. With faith, we'd encourage you to put some of that money in the church plate if when
Yep.
she would go to church with us, or if there was something in the community or whatever it was. And you get that feeling of giving, which we all know is when you give, you always get more back, spiritually and personally,
Yep.
than what you gave. So teaching those three things all the time, no matter what age the child is. But I think from what I've read and from what I've studied over the years, around first grade is a great time to start this. Around age 6
Mhm.
is when children have the capacity to really understand and start to learn these things.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The earlier the better. Even like recently, I was kind of looking. I have a friend who recently had a kid and very young, but I was thinking like, wouldn't it be fun to get like a book on like a very early childhood book on money and just to kind of expose them to the idea of like a piggy bank and just exposure to that kind of thinking is useful. I think first grade definitely makes sense to when the kids are understanding what's going on and
Right. They're getting some
yeah, but
structure in their life anyway, with
yeah,
school and
exactly,
such.
exactly. But I would think like as early as you can, just to start instilling some of those ideas, I think makes a lot of sense.
And I guess another step that people used to take, and it was more concrete, so I'm not sure it has the same impact, but taking the child and opening a bank account. I mean, I remember going to the bank with my mom and
Mhm.
having a little savings account with a book. I think we're before your time, Russ. I'm sorry, but I'm going back. Used to get a book, a passbook. Looked like a passport.
Okay.
and you would go in with your money and give it to the teller, and she'd have a dot matrix printer. She'd put the passbook in, and you'd hear, and that would be the printing of your deposit plus your interest, and you'd see your new balance. And,
Wow. Okay.
and that was a pretty powerful thing to save some money and see it building in there.
Yeah.
And to have that physical thing, I think the same concept can work with opening an online bank account with your child now, or still a physical bank. You're not going to have that passbook. You're going to have a random receipt, maybe.
Right.
So it's probably a little less
Yeah, I think
powerful.
it's not as interactive, and as a kid having that visual and the
Hmm.
sounds and everything like that obviously left an impact. So there is a little bit of that missing these days, I would think. But I
But there's
know
all.
that, yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
One thing that I read recently was and I don't even know where I saw this, but they were saying for kids, rather than having like the traditional piggy bank where like it's like a pig, to
Right.
have like a see-through jar that they can see the money like building and growing and
Accumulating. Yeah.
accumulating. I think that just those visuals and those more interactive things are really good for kids.
Yep. And although the passbook was very powerful, with an online bank, you could use the graphics that they have
Yeah.
probably to show a bar chart or a graph of some type of what's happening. And also an advantage today, as these children get older, is you can use some of the financial calculators online to, say, well, what if you saved $5 a week, for 10 years and you earned a certain percentage of interest? How much do you think you'd have? And the power, a lesson I think to imprint very early, maybe we're up 10 or 12 years old now when they understand math concepts better than first grade, right?
Yeah.
But to show them compounding interest and the
Yes.
power of it, because it is something that most people don't understand until they actually do it for themselves. They used to get the calculator and do it, but now you get all these software programs, and to see that virtually anyone can become a millionaire if they have this long-term vision and they put money aside and they invest it and they stay focused and disciplined over your working career. It is not super difficult to save more than $1 million.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I first realized like I mean that was something I didn't really learn much about. Definitely not in school about
Right.
compounding interest. Like I
Should
think
be
that's
part of a math class
absolutely,
somewhere, right?
absolutely, and I hope it is more these days. But I definitely we had nothing about finance in my school really, and I remember seeing I think it was an online calculator when I was like early in my teenage years. Um, and seeing like the chart of compounding where it's like your contribution is small and then the interest or the growth is
Hmm.
higher and higher and higher, and at the end of whatever 30 years 40 years the amount that you contribute is tiny compared to what's the growth on top of that. So when I first saw that, I was like, "Wow, that was an eye opener." So, definitely showing that to kids, I think, at the right age would make sense and help them get a sense of, all right, wow, there's something to this savings idea.
That's right. That's right. And so when a child is 12 or getting into the teenagers, I guess there's some debate, and this is a parental decision. But at some point, I think it's helpful if they're responsible. Obviously, if they spend every dollar and they borrow money from the local bookie, we don't want to do this. But assuming that the child is learning and interested, um, I think providing them with a debit card for their own account. Do not give them your debit card. Don't say Jeff Perry said give them your debit card. No,
Right.
having a debit card. Fidelity has a great program. They have youth accounts. We created one for Faith a number of years ago, and it has a lot of educational materials on it that they watched, to get onboarded, if you will. And there's different ones for different ages. But the foundation is a debit card that
Yeah.
they can use that is controlled. There's not going to be a big fee if they spend all their money. There's not.
Right.
It's designed to, obviously it's designed to bring people as customers, as adults, to Fidelity. That's what it's designed for. But it has the benefit of letting them make some mistakes with the debit card and seeing how to use it and seeing the online accounts and being able to put money in and so forth. And they can even invest in the youth account if they want to, if you can build up a little bit and, buy a share of Disney or whatever the child wants to do. If you want to expose them to investing, it does that.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to associate a debit card with them early, because many times young people are not exposed to actually having a debit card or a credit card until they're in college. They're 18. They go to some campus thing and they get a free T-shirt if you open this credit card or debit card, and they're off to the races without any really guidance
Yeah.
or formal kind of mentoring. They have a debit card now, and there's a million stories about what can go wrong.
Right. And I think there's like debit cards too, and maybe this is the same where you could even have it set up where they have like a specific limit, like the allowance can be on
Right.
the debit card,
Yes,
and
exactly.
then it just gets the child used to using that because credit cards, debit cards are everywhere these days. So getting to understand how that works, I think, is crucial.
In a supervised setting, as the
Yeah.
parent and grandparent, you have access to see what they're doing,
Right.
so that they bought an ice cream, or, they're
Yeah.
not sports betting already.
Yeah.
So just to get them into developing positive, disciplined habits while you are there to guide them, rather than just saying you're 18, you go to the bank and get a bank account now. I'm not, you're not using me anymore, isn't probably
Yeah.
the best advice.
Yeah.
Right. So
Absolutely
it's
agree.
all about getting them exposed to information and learning good habits before. And speaking of good habits, I think and this is something that used to be so prevalent. We all had part-time jobs growing up, whether they were summer jobs or whether they were after school or on the weekends. Most young people had some type of job. And that's not what I see today. I see very few teenagers, for example, working. And I know they have a lot of stress. I know it's an anxiety ridden world for a lot of them, with social media and what they're trying to achieve in school and athletics. But I think having a part-time job is such a key part of your financial literacy as you're growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes along with what you were saying earlier, just like, earning something like you're putting in the work and then you're earning from that, like it's such a huge part of our culture, and you need to work to have a living, and if you're not, if you're waiting until after college or whatever it is to start experiencing that, it's like, all right, that's a shock, if there's been no exposure at all. Yeah, even, I mean, in my experience, I worked at a summer camp for years,
Hmm.
and it's a great way to get started. And it's like, it is a job, and it's seasonal, obviously, and you're outdoors. I think it's a great way to start, for a lot of kids. That wouldn't necessarily be after school, but that would be
No,
during
it
the summer.
it could be summer, it could be after school, could be on weekends, whatever works for the family's schedule and all that. We got to get
Right,
them there.
right.
And this just dovetails right into the where, think about kids getting older, and so maybe offering a debit card, a used debit card, teaching them about money. We're certainly talking about working, because these things are going to come up like, oh, I need a car. I want a car, right? So now we're 16 years old and I want a car,
Hmm.
or whatever. Lots of the older they get, the more expensive that their wants
Yeah.
get, right? And so, how do you handle that as a parent? And what message are you sending, or as a grandparent, or an uncle, whatever role you are? And if the lesson is you don't have to work, you'll be gifted to you. That is very generous and it's wonderful for the giver. But there's other ways that you can do it and be generous and still impart lessons on this, even if it's a de minimis amount. So, a lot of the research that I've read and listened to, over the years indicates, like, if you want to help a child, if you want to buy the child a car, at least have them working so that they can cover the gas, right? Or have them save up a certain percentage. It can be from 50-50 to 90-10, whatever it is. If the car is $5,000, which is a very reasonable price for a car, tell them that you will match, you'll pay whatever it is that you think is right. Keep it easy. 50% of the car and 50% of the insurance for the first year, but you have to get a job and save the other part because these expenses are going to go on forever. You're going to have repairs. Explain the whole thing.
Right.
And we all know from our own histories that if you earn something, you treat it differently than if it's given to you,
Yeah.
right?
Good
So
point.
whether it's whatever it is, right? So I think that's what the next step as they're getting older, they've learned about money, they have a good foundation, it's been modeled well by the parents. But when we get into these big ticket items, I think the child having some skin in the game changes the whole way that they look at that item and their understanding of what you need to do to be able to support something that you've taken responsibility for. And in this case, it's a car.
Yeah. And even if it's a portion and they've been saving up for that portion that they were able to afford, that's, money that they've been building up over time. There's like that commitment. And it changes the way that they perceive whatever it is they're getting.
Yep.
So yeah, very good point.
Absolutely. I think it's also a great time in the teenage years, or before, but by the teenage years to start including the children, or at least allowing them to hear some of the family discussions about money.
Yeah.
And that doesn't need to be like, here's how much money we have. I'm not saying that, but maybe exposing them to conversations about budgets and how much things cost to run the house and how much things cost to do whatever the family's doing, or to explain, we're going on a family vacation. This is how much we have to spend this year.
Yeah.
And this is how much each thing's cost. Because if you're not exposed to it, you have no idea that it costs you $10,000 to spend a week at Disney, right?
Right.
And to show that, to show the child that there's parking at the airport, there's airline tickets, there's food, there's hotel, there's tickets, there's entertainment, there's souvenirs. And I think it's helpful just to further educate and set a positive setting. Not to have it complaining like, oh my God, it's costing us 10,000. You rotten kids. I can't believe them. You know,
Right.
have it in a positive way, but just exposing them to the discussions between the parents in this case, or whoever it is with the child, that they can understand how the world works.
Yeah, I think having that budget conversation, that was another thing I didn't really learn much about
Right.
until later. But the idea of like, all right, here's our set budget and here's how we break it down. And I know a lot of parents that do that, but they don't talk to their kids about it. I
Right.
think it's really valuable because kids can like if they go on a vacation and their parents are spending money, it's like, oh yeah, there's just like an endless supply. But a lot of a lot of the parents are, it's very meticulous and
Right. And it can be stressful for the parents who are trying to deliver that perfect vacation. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and exposing them not just to spending, but also savings in different ways. Maybe reinforcing the compound interest values with talking about investments and saving money outside of banks. And this is why we do it. And we save money for retirement and save money for this or that, just to broaden it out, just to help your child get a longer term vision of how you can achieve great things with time and work.
Yeah, and I know one other thing I was thinking was like a lot of grandparents will gift like specific securities to their grandkids, like
Mhm.
just to show them like, look at this. This is now you could be a part owner of Amazon or Tesla, whatever it might be, and having that if the kid is interested in it, that could be something that really opens their eyes to the idea of saving and investing from an early age. So that's another piece.
Our team leader, Chris Boyd, loves to talk about this issue in the context of charitable remainder trusts or different charitable ways. Like if you have a family um, who you can get together all in the same place, you could do it virtually, I guess, and you have these annual decisions or one-time decisions on where to the family, most cases the grandparents or the parents, but where the family is going to make some charitable donations to
Mhm.
to create, you don't have to call it this, but like a mini family board, and have a meeting about it and talk about where we'd like to donate this year, and maybe give a little piece of the donation decision to each family member,
Yep.
as long as they can explain why. So Sally, who do you think we should donate money to? And not just the American Red Cross, but why,
Yeah.
and then have them articulate that and kind of maybe even deliver the check if possible. There's a lot you can do to make this a positive experience and to set your own values. I guess that's the last part of what we'll talk about for the time we have remaining, but to set these lifelong values, legacy values, impart them on your family, and they'll last forever, and hopefully they'll last for generations. And
Yeah.
hopefully they're positive because they're going to last forever and maybe generations, right? Right. And, this goes into your estate planning as well. It goes all throughout your life. These things that you model and these things that you share. As a retired lawyer, I saw too many times estate plans which were very well thought out by the grantors, the people who wrote them, with specific reasons, and they never explained it to their heirs, and so the meaning never actually really got there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you explain it, and if you don't want to explain it when they're alive, you can leave a video, you can leave letters, love letters, life letters. But you're leaving your legacy. Many times it's money, but not always. And if you can articulate the lesson and the reasons that you're doing things, your legacy and their view of it, and their view of what that means to them for their future, and they're raising kids. Speaking of generations, it can be really powerful if done correctly.
Yeah, I think having those conversations, when it makes sense, can be really a game changer for that legacy planning. But also, like, just to even just be a little more transparent, come closer as a family. I think that there's a lot of power to it,
Yeah.
to be able to have those open conversations, and it can be as frank and forthcoming as is appropriate. But to start talking about money, it doesn't need to be a taboo. It's important, and especially where, like you said, with the estate planning and legacy planning, that's really where it comes into play, and it's crucial to have those conversations.
I hope this is a conversation which I enjoyed very much for us, and I think it's one that financial advisors, financial podcasts, they don't talk much about, but I think it's important because if you think about what we've talked about from very early on, you as a parent, a grandparent, or someone that loves his child has an opportunity to mold their values, how they perceive things, how they look at things positively and negatively. And we're talking about money specifically, but how they view money, and teach them lessons about how to build wealth, what to do with it, to be charitable, to be a saver, and all the way through their upbringing, to their college, through their life, and even when you are leaving with your legacy, you have an influence to change your family dynamic and change generations about how money is viewed in your family. You have a lot of power there if you do it right, and be a wonderful gift for you to be able to have a positive influence in your family about how the children, and then those children become parents, teach their generations about money. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you'll tune in next week when we'll have another interesting financial topic. Until then, keep striving for something more.
Thank you for listening to Something More with Chris Boyd. Call us for help, whether it's for financial planning or portfolio management, insurance concerns, or those quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Whatever's on your mind, visit us at somethingmorewithchrisboyd.com or call us toll free at 866-771-8901. Or send us your questions to amr-info@wealthenhancement.com. You're listening to Something More with Chris Boyd Financial Talk Show. Wealth Enhancement Advisory Services and J. Christopher Boyd provide investment advice on an individual basis to clients only. Proper advice depends on a complete analysis of all facts and circumstances. The information given on this program is general financial comments and cannot be relied upon as pertaining to your specific situation. Wealth Enhancement Group cannot guarantee that using the information from this show will generate profits or ensure freedom from loss. Listeners should consult their own financial advisors or conduct their own due diligence before making any financial decisions.